Hello there. I want to talk a little bit about post-honing regimen or post-honing routine. A lot of times that's a question that comes up after you finish honing the razor. What's your next step or your next steps? And when I was first learning to hone, I watched all the guys that came before me, and they would talk about the subject. And one of the things that I would see over and over again is that what they said didn't quite jive with what they were actually doing. What I mean by that, for example, they would say, when it came to stropping, well, I do like 50 on cloth and 100 on leather, about. They would always use that word, about. But if you watched them, if they demonstrated and you counted, they would do 80 or 100 on cloth and 150 or 160 on leather. The numbers that they were given did not jive with what they were actually doing. So when you hear me call out a number, that's the actual number. That is what I do. I count. See, these guys, they weren't really being disingenuous about anything. They weren't being deceptive. They just said, I do about this many, and then they went to stropping or whatever it was they were doing. Even when they were doing passes on a stone, I've seen a lot of them go, well, I do 10 passes on a 12K. The guy did like 30. Okay. They weren't deceiving anybody or trying to. They just weren't paying attention. They were going along, and then when they got done, they said, well, they were probably going on the feel of the razor or something like that. And when they got done, well, that was about this many passes. So when you hear me call out a number, that is the number I use. That's number one. So what do I do when I get done honing a razor? What's the first thing I do? The first thing that I do is take a loop and look at the edge. Now, I am looking at the edge of the razor all throughout the honing regimen, okay? And I'm looking at the end. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking at the bevel and seeing how even the polish is. I'm looking for areas that have differential scratches. In other words, there might be one portion of the blade might be polished better than the others. One portion of the blade, the scratch pattern might be pretty much gone, but at the heel or the toe or someplace like that, you'll see some scratches that are more evident. Okay, then I didn't hit that blade well enough, and I need to go back to whatever I got to go back to evenly hit everything, whether it's back to the 8K or back to the 4K or something like that. Another thing that I'm looking for is like a chippy edge. Now, if you use something, you can get a chippy edge off of anything. Okay? If you get a little bit of grit on your stone and you don't realize it, that can chip the living snot out of your edge. If you're honing and you leave a little bit won't hurt, but if you leave a lot of swarf on your edge, now I've seen Japanese sushi chefs, okay, can't talk today. I've seen Japanese sushi chefs demonstrate sharpening on water stones, and they'll point at the swarf and say, leave that on there because it helps to cut. Well, that's probably true on a knife, because on a kitchen knife, they're looking for a nice, smooth, sharp edge, but they're looking for something with a little bit of tooth to cut things like onion or tomato skin or something like that, so that it pierces the skin a little bit instead of just only slicing. So on a knife, that's probably good. But what swarf is whatever the medium you use to lubricate, water, oil, whatever it might be, that has suspended metal particles in it. And so a little bit of that's not going to hurt. But if you are honing on a lot of black swarf mud, you don't want those particles hitting the edge of your razor because it'll chip the living crap out of it. Okay? you'll have a grabby, toothy, uncomfortable edge. So that can happen. With a caudicle sometimes, Dr. Matt has that video, everybody pretty much knows the technique now, where he finishes on a caudicle under running water. Well, the reason he does that, if you really pay attention, because a lot of guys have taken this and applied it to JNATs and stuff like that, and it might work, but it's the JNAT is not a caudicle, and the JNAT slurry breaks down in a different way. A caudicle, when you come off a caudicle, off the slurry and start transitioning to clear water, some cauticles, some cauticles are so hard that you can finish on clear water. I don't have to use the running water technique. The running water technique was developed by him because he noticed an awful lot of cauticles that did what you call an auto slurry. Okay, it took him time to figure it out, you know. And what it is even if you put just plain water on the caudicle, you rinse it off and clean it well, and rinse the razor off and clean it well, and put clean water on that caudicle, the caudicle will kick up garnets. Maybe not enough for you to really see. The water might still look clear, but enough to trash your edge when you're trying to do really, really fine refinement. And so what the running water technique was developed for was to wash away those garnets while you were honing on clear water on cauticles that auto slurried, okay? Japanese water stones and stuff, they don't do that. They don't do it. It's not the same thing. So people have misconstrued what he was talking about. But, okay, if you got a caudicle that auto slurries, you might end up with a chippy edge. Same thing with Arkansas stones. Arkansas stones are wonderful to hone with, but some Arkansas stones and some oil stones, like a lot of times people will set a bevel on a fine India. Oil stones have this characteristic, even the India stones to some extent, where you can finish the surface of the stone in a certain way, and it will influence how aggressive or how mild, for lack of a better term, or how fine that stone will cut, okay? If you are using an India stone and it's not prepped for razors, you're probably going to end up with some ugly chips in an edge, okay? What do? Well, you prep that stone and use it for razors, or you use a 1K water stone or something more appropriate to that. Some Arkansas softs, there's a range of coarse and fineness to every Arkansas stone that you find. Okay, even the translucent and the black and the true hards, all of that. Okay, there's a range. Okay, some of them will be finer than others, and some of them won't, and you can influence that by the way you prep the stone. But there are some Arkansas stones that are better quality than other Arkansas stones, flat out, period. That's the way that it is. And so you might get a soft that if you use, a matte surface on it, or if you use too many reps on it, too many passes, it'll start to chip your edge. My Arkansas soft has a tendency to do that, even on the side that I've burnished really good. So what do I do to fix that? Well, I go to the edge of my soft Arkansas, and I joint the edge of that razor. And it'll take a while. It takes longer on the Arkansas than it will on a caudicle or a JNAT, okay, or a water stone, okay. It takes a little longer to bring the edge back, but the edge will come back smooth, and that's what you're looking for. So I'm looking for stuff like that. I'm looking for the polish, whether it's even or not. I'm looking for a chippy edge, that kind of deal. If I find anything like that, I need to go back and correct that. And once I've gone back to correct that, and I come back to, now we're at post-hone again. So what's my next step? Well, I'm going to glass it again, make sure it's right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to stropping. Now, on stropping, these are the numbers I use every time I hone a razor. Okay? 60 laps exactly on cloth and 120 laps on leather. Exactly. Now, you don't have to be exact. Those numbers don't have to be your numbers. I have found over time that those are the numbers that seem to work for me. It's the same thing like pre-shave. Okay, I do 20 laps on cloth and 40 laps on leather. Post-shave, I do 20 on cloth and 20 on leather. Some people don't do post-shave stropping. You're going to find that honing and shaving with a straight razor, you're going to find routines that you either feel like they work, somehow you have evidence that they work, or you just they make you feel better, okay? And you're going to choose things accordingly. So I will do 60 passes on cloth and 120 on leather, and what I use, and you'll find what you like the best. What I generally use when it comes to cloth is one of two different types of cloth. The first I use, and my go-to, is a fire hose linen. This is fantastic. You won't find anything better when it comes to how the cloth actually affects the edge of a straight razor than this, period. But now a second to it that I really like is, this is I think it's cotton, but I might not be 100% correct, but this is my Tony Miller stropping. And the cloth that he uses, this is not the linen. For some reason, this is really, really good material, and that would be like my second choice. But when it comes to stropping on leather, there's one strop that I use more than any other, and you guessed it, it's the Tony Miller. This is my Tony Miller plain vanilla. Now, I've got several different strops, and they're all wonderful. But this leather, it's got to be the way that Tony preps his leather, or the leather that he's choosing. This, as far as I know, is cowhide. This strop has kind of a magnetic draw to it. It's not got a heavy draw. It's a fairly light draw. But it's not one of those slick light draws where the razor just slicks and slides all over the cloth. This leather tends to kind of pull the razor down to it. It pulls the spine and the edge down to that leather. And so that it, in my opinion, there's a really, really positive contact between the strop and the edge that you really don't have to fool with it or worry about it. It's going to contact the edge properly. And so I like this particularly for post-hone stropping because of that feature. Now, once I get done with the stropping, then what I generally do, and this is go to the hanging hair test. This is my wife's hair. It's important that you use the same person's hair over and over and over in your test. Don't use different hairs. Now, I started out trying to use my hair, but my hair is super fine. And the test doesn't work really well with it. So you need to find one that you can consistently use, that gives you consistent results. And what I would say on HHT is a couple of things. HHT is just a type of test that you can use. The HHT is not going to say this razor is shave ready and this razor is not. Okay, there's a big misconception. Oh, it passed HHT, but it shaves like a dog. Yeah, that happens. It won't pass HHT, but it shaves wonderfully. That happens too. The thing about the HHT in general is I can tell by the way it cuts the hair, whether the hair jumps away, whether the hair is really quiet, whether it plays violin on it, whether it tries to split the hair, how it feels when I cut that, whether it's grabby or whether, I just barely feel it or whether I don't feel it at all. And a bunch of different things involved there in the interaction between the hair in my hand and the edge of that razor will tell me kind of a ballpark of what that edge might be like. But the thing of it is until you put it up to your face, all bets are off. It does not matter what the HHT says. In the end, it's going to be, and I know guys, they don't use HHT anymore. That's good. That's fine. If that's what you want. Like I said, it's that shave test that counts. I still use it because I find value in it. If I get a razor that, isn't passing HHT all the way up and down the edge of that razor, you can bet that I'm going to go back to the spots on that razor that it's not cutting hair. I'm going to go back to a 4K or something like that and work on those individual areas and then blend it all together. You've seen me do it on my videos. Bring it back up through to the finishing stages and do it all over again until I know that it's passing, because I know my personal history with honing has shown me consistently that most of the time when that razor is not passing HHT in certain areas of the blade, I'm going to get a subpar shave. So I'm going to go back until it passes. But okay, then what? Well, then you shave, right? And that's going to tell the tale. If you get a smooth shave, you're good. If not, then you've got to come back to figuring out what you did wrong. You got to go back to the stones and maybe spend more time in one area than the other. Most of the time what happens is you didn't quite get your bevel set, or when you came off the bevel to the 3K or the 4K or the 5K, whichever it is, you didn't spend enough time on that stone to actually get rid of all of those 1K scratches, but you progressed on up to the 8 and the 12 and whatever else or to the natural stone or whatever. And it polished things up and made it look good, but those initial scratches are still left somewhere. You didn't do your post-honing inspection well enough. Something is wrong. So if I get a razor that doesn't pass a shave test comfortably, the first thing I'm going to do is go back to that and try to find what happened to that razor and go from there. So that's post-honing. Look, your post-honing routine is just as important as what you're doing when you first start to hone that blade. Okay? Because it's all about evaluating the edge with an eye toward improving what you're doing. And trust me, I have been honing 5 years, close to 6, I think, but at least 5. Okay? And there are guys that have been honing 20. All right? If you stop learning, if you think you know everything, you're done. Okay? There should always be something somewhere that you can improve. How you do that? Well, the post-honing routine will help. But more than anything else, it's hone, hone, hone. Hone, shave test, hone, shave test, hone, shave test, hone, shave test. Until you're right ready to puke, okay, over and over and over again. And the more time you spend doing that, the more you'll begin to grasp what's going on at the edge of that razor. And so I hope that this helped. I appreciate everybody that watched. Bless you. Happy honing. I'll talk to you later.